Hello there, my name's Mark. We'll be playing Fate, the Traitor Soul today. Fate, the Traitor Soul was released in 2009. It is the second of two expansions to Fate, a game that, according to the box art, sold over 4 million copies. I mean, I'm just doing this on the spot, so I don't really know if that's actually accurate or if it's because they bundled a lot of them with newer computers. That's how I actually first encountered Fate. I was 10, and my parents had just bought a cheap Windows Vista computer from my mom's nursing school, and Fate was preloaded on there. And because we didn't have good internet, I was kind of stuck with whoever I could find on there and the occasional allowance money games that I'd buy at the store. That's not to say I don't think Fate's a bad game. It's got nostalgia for me, but it's not. I've played better games since. But anyway, what is Fate? Fate is a roguelike dungeon crawler. In other words, the dungeons are never the same, and you're pretty much just going for an infinite dungeon of infinite generated floors. Similarly, there are random items to find, random monsters to kill. It doesn't really do anything revolutionary, but I find it to be pretty fun. If you had either of the previous two games, because they were both standalone, the Fate series has always had an option to import characters from previous games, if you wanted to bring characters from your previous playthroughs back. I don't currently have any of the other Fate games on here. I'm using the Traitor Soul. And the Traitor Soul is basically, if you've ever played Undiscovered Realms, it's kind of a slightly more fleshed out version of that one. As in, it's got the Drancha, it's got a Typhon. I almost forgot the names for them. Because you don't really think about it. There's no real heavy story. Really, you get some exposition in the beginning, and that's about it. Beyond that, there's very little in the way of plot. Nothing really happens. The Cursed King, the sequel to this, and probably the closest thing the original Fate has to a sequel, did focus more on the overall story, but it's still pretty much just Fate. Now, you have your usual stuff, your menu stuff here. So we'll just get into a new game, and you're presented with two choices. You can either do through the default adventure mode, which is pretty much how you should play the game, and that's because hardcore is not very fun. Enemies are scaled to ridiculous levels, and you're always underpowered. You have to grind for hours and hours just to even survive another floor, and you can't even play with mods. Now, I'm not using mods in this playthrough just because, I'm trying to preserve the game into its regular fashion, but you can mod the Fate series, and I know the Cursed King has some ultimate mod pack that changes a whole bunch of stuff. But this isn't the Cursed King, this is the Traitor Soul. And it is what it is, pretty much. So we'll just go on and pick Adventure. You get 4 difficulties. Really, this just determines how fast the monster scales, how often it introduces new monsters, and it also gives you a chance of better loot every now and then. As in, in Page you don't really get any kind of enhanced loot. Adventure, you get a chance of superior loot. Hero, you get a chance of exceptional loot. And Legend mode gives you a chance for legendary loot. But all those qualities really do are just modify the base stats of an item. It doesn't really change how they function. No improved requirements. None of that really. So we're gonna stick on page because I figure I might, if I'm gonna do a full playthrough, once I've retired on page, we'll go to adventure and so on. To give that impression that the darkness just grows with each generation, trying to overcome this smug kid that's now hiding behind the menu. So, the Traitor Soul introduced the idea of races to the series. Really, I just stick with the human because that's kind of the more iconic race of the series. He's on every box art, and really, your appearance doesn't matter. Your race doesn't matter, none of that. The only difference it makes are kind of what your race was specialized in to begin with. As in the humans, probably your most arcane focused race. Your Shadow Elf is generally sort of your agile ranger type character. The half-orc is kind of your warrior-ish character. And your Cogger is kind of a tank, really. But the human's the most well-rounded, and also the most magic-oriented of all of them. And given that I like to play a more well-rounded character, rather than just suit up in the heaviest armor and wield a giant hammer, I feel like he'll probably be the best choice for us. Again, your sex doesn't matter either, so it is what it is. And once you start equipping armor and stuff, your appearance really doesn't matter. I think we'll just go with a meme character that reminds me of some of Eternal Darkness almost. If you ever played Eternal Darkness, there was like a character named, I think Anthony, or I think. I don't remember off the top of my head. It's been years since I've played that game, and this game for this matter, so if I forget something. I first played these games when I was like 10, so, and I'm 24 now, so it's quite a while. Anyway, in that game, the third character you play as, he gets inflicted with a spell and becomes gradually more and more decayed. He looked almost like this, actually, just instead of a tattoo, just more rot. But that's just random stuff. Now you can choose a random name if you really want. I don't know. They're all interesting, but the names do eventually loop. And I'm just gonna go with my regular name just for the sake of it, really. Now, your pet also doesn't matter. They get no different attributes, and once you start feeding your pet fish, they won't even be this pet anymore anyway. So, we'll go with a dog, because I have a dog, and we'll name him Blitz. Because, well, might as well, right?
Your armor clatters on stone as you sit on the temple floor. And so,
the plot, like I said, that's the only real plot you'll ever get in the game. Now, the game is kind of like Diablo. It plays pretty much like Diablo. You use your mouse, you point where you're gonna go, you hold, you can do this to determine your attacks and all that. Your interface is also pretty much identical. So, it's pretty simple. You click on these guys and they give you quests.
You have received the task.
These guys will give you quests.
You have received the task.
Courage, young traveler.
Your courage must be
You have received
tempered
the
with
task.
humility.
But if you've never played Fate before, the best one to get is the Traitor Soul. Mostly because it's kind of the best of all three games, with the original games. You can go to Fate to play the first game. You can go to Grove and play the first game. Then Undiscovered Realms had Urantia, Typhon, and once you complete these two, you get Chaos. And then the Traitor Soul really just introduced the Dreamer Trials. it's really more of an expansion to the second game. Or first expansion. Really, they were titled as expansions. But we're just gonna go to Grove to start because, well, it would, since I didn't do the first one, it'd make more sense to start with something
Never have you
resembling
seen
the
such
first one.
fine craftsmanship.
Now, I don't see much point in keeping much of my initial stuff, but I will buy a sword because I'll buy a sword and whatever simple starting gear I can afford. I think that's everything, really. At least I'll go in with something more than my bare hands. I could have used the staff, but that's no fun. It'll be more useful later when I actually find enchanted ones. Be more of a spell sword. Now, something that's kind of fun is,
You never know what
really,
sort of
you won't
deals
be
you'll
buying
find on
mundane
highways.
items that often. The best way to really get good items in this game is either to loot them off of rare enemies, or enchanted as the game manual seems to call it, or you can gamble. And yes, this game I think had an E10 plus rating on
All of life's a gamble.
it. And this is basically loot boxes before they were cool. Except, you know what base item you're getting. You just don't know what random properties you're gonna get. And you can get either good or bad. The items you'll find in merchants are usually less powerful than the ones you can gamble for. You won't ever get artifacts from gambling, but you will get,
Have I got a deal for you?
you know, for example, this is like a 15,000 gold bow, just about. And that's just a simple bow, whereas, you know, you go back over here,
Yeah.
well, they don't have a bow, but you say you could find a bow that's about 20,000, but it could be worth as much as probably 50. You could get a really good bargain. And the items, the only problem is you might not get bonuses that are relevant to you. But you can always sell the item back. Or you can save scope. That's an option too. Now, you can talk to some of the people and get quests. This
You
is
have
where
received a task.
the majority of your experience and one of the two ways of really gaining fame. If you complete quests, you get a lot of experience. You get a little bit of fame. Fame Max is like a secondary experience system, which instead of giving you straight skill points, or rather, you get skill points instead of stat points. Whereas when you level up normally, you don't get many skill points, but you gain stat points. It's a little convoluted, but I wouldn't say clunky necessarily. You get a map, you'll want to keep it as zoomed out as far as you can. Mostly because, naturally, when you're exploring a dungeon and dealing with the auto map, it's a little easier to see more of where you've been. Now, normally, I take any quests that I can get on the first floor, or whatever, but whenever it's a shrine quest, you want to wait until you're a little more powerful.
And you're always welcome
You
here.
have
It's like a
received a
secondary
quest.
quest. The reason you don't want to take the shrine quests right away is you're probably not powerful enough.
Hello.
And yeah. Oh, and I was about to say, the game's a little buggy sometimes. Occasionally when you talk to an NPC right as the game's loading the music again,
Well met.
You
you
have
might just
received a
get the
task.
music cut out. And that's creates a slightly eerie atmosphere, especially in the dungeons. Also, yeah, you get some help. Basically, this is your pet's status. You know, their inventory, their health. You don't get to use magic for your pet stuff, so there's no real need for it. Now, you also have your basic health bar. You have the stamina bar, which is kind of useless in my opinion. At least until you get to higher levels and you have like hundreds of stamina. You don't usually ever have to worry about running out when you're moving around. And you also have a stamina meter. Excuse me, you got a mana meter, it was right in front of me. Obviously that's for spells. I don't have any spells right now, but we will get some eventually. You got an experience bar and naturally, you know, buttons for all your various things. There's also the ability to switch between sets in this game. You can equip a second set of equipment. And it can be helpful if you like to switch on the fly. Like, if you're casting magic, switch to a staff or something. We'll go on and enter the dungeon because there's no point in sitting around. Now, dungeons are pretty straightforward. Kill everything that's trying to kill you and try your best to not die. Excuse me. If you're playing on page mode, these are the only guys you're going to see in the first 5 or so floors. So it's kind of it's more of a chore because you're just going to be seeing the same guys. The equipment is getting stronger. Their level isn't even going to go up hardly much. But you'll level up fairly quickly. At least for your first 2 points. I wouldn't be surprised if I'm level 5 before the end of the floor. And the reason I say stamina's kind of pointless is that, you know, I'm just going to show you the default walk speed of your character. It's pitiful, isn't it? So you think, why don't you always run? That's one of 2 things the stamina meter contains. The other is a rage attack, also introduced in this version. If you don't have enough stamina, you can't use it. It uses 50 stamina and 5 mana. It's really low requirements, so if you're later in the game, it's an attack that can literally be spammed. And by spam, I mean, it'll probably be the only attack you choose to use, because your stamina will generate so quickly that it's virtually irrelevant to the main attack, or the other way around. The only reason I don't...
Your health is dangerously low.
Now, you start off somewhat weak to begin with. It's pretty easy to get overwhelmed until you start getting reasonable equipment and leveling up. But once you start leveling, on page mode, if you start leveling up enough, it becomes very hard to die. The later difficulties remedy is a lot better. I'll probably wait till I have an identify spell for those. It's usually one of the first few pet spells you come across. In the meantime, I'll put the rest with my pet. And kind of like Diablo, you do get like the occasional enchanted item that you'll have to identify. Normally, if you ever played Diablo 2, there's always Deckard Cain, you could identify your stuff for free, as long as you had town portals and whatnot. This game has no such mercy.
Your stamina is low.
You'll have to use your own means of identifying everything. Which shouldn't be an issue if it's one of the humans' biggest advantages.
You have gained in experience and skill.
It's why the humans are probably the best race. Because even their default spell stats are pretty good. They're not overwhelmingly powerful, but for reference, they can identify something at level 18 right away. Whereas the basic spell that everyone else gets from the beginning is free. And the mana cost is insanely low, no matter which race. Even the half deal with it in some capacity. Now, when you level up, you get, like I said, you get a few points to put into your stuff. Usually, I try to keep my attributes somewhat balanced. That way, you know, my magic isn't overshadowing my strength and whatnot, because some of the magic spells in this game can be really useful, and you want a decent magic stat.
You have completed the quest.
The reason you want a halfway decent magic stat is because while you can improve, say, attack magic, and it'll improve the damage of some things, for stuff like Poison Cloud, it doesn't actually improve the damage so much as it improves the duration. Whereas if you have a high magic, it kind of overall influences your attack magic and the otherwise damages spells. Now you'll notice that I returned to town. The reason I chose to return to town is there's no point in wasting a portal scroll if you're on the first level of the dungeon. I figured I might as well collect the quest, maybe even find another quest soon.
You have received the quest.
Now, you know, most times you're not going to get the most powerful items from most characters in their quests. Although there have been times where I've somehow managed to get artifacts.
Let me show you what I have to sell.
There's a small oddity here that I can show you.
Insufficient funds.
You can't buy items with a pet. Which, I mean, I guess it makes sense. Pet wouldn't know how to barter for anything. But as you can see, that more than financed the book. I think that's where I'm going to leave it for now. I don't want these videos getting too long and boring, because the game's pretty much just like this the whole way through. We'll try to do 1 or 2 floors at a time. Fate's not really a game where you can marathon it so much, but the most I can usually handle is 4 to 5 floors at a time, but a video like that would be almost 2 hours long if I were doing quests for every single floor. And with 5 dungeons, that's just not terribly feasible to try and do that many, well, videos of 2 hours long. So, see you in the next one.